Welcome, brothers, to tonight's our second debate night for William O. Ware Lodge of Research. This is a called meeting at Spindletop Hall in Lexington, Kentucky. My name is Cameron Poe. I'll be your moderator for this evening. My official timekeeper is Keith Dunkel, seated at the table here. We'll go ahead and get started because it is warm outside and inside. Brothers, tonight's resolution that we're going to be discussing is that Masonic lodges are chartered and set to labor for the express purpose of making Masons. This charge, however, is not to be construed as being a directive to merely add more men to the roster of membership, but is rather a mandate to instruct, mentor, and develop men who are seeking to improve themselves in Masonry. Our affirmative team this evening is Brother Roger Kurt and Brother Tim Bramble, to my right. Our negative team this evening is Brother Tracy Burdett and Brother Jeremy Patrick, to my left. We'll go ahead and begin.
Good luck. Good luck, Tracy.
Brother Roger Kurt, you are up first. You have an opening statement for 6 minutes.
There is no debate that the charter of a Masonic lodge does in fact charge us to make Masons. The question before us this evening boils down to what is meant by the words, make Masons. Is there a distinction between making a member and making a Mason? Finally, if there are in fact differences between the two, how do those differences impact the man and his lodge? Like many of you, I grew up busy with various tasks of things I had, or I should say, my parents obligated me to do. In middle school, I remember an evening showing up with wet hair because I just finished swimming practice and socks that did not match to my band concert in front of school and parents. Among the many things my band director blamed my miserable performance on was the dinner I just inhaled 10 minutes prior to the concert, which was inevitably clogging my clarinet. And although it is true I was a member of the school band, I was far from being a musician. One of the very first things a potential candidate for masonry must learn is to wait a time with patience. The word patience is the ability to endure difficult or undesired long-term circumstances. In 1930, J.A. Evans wrote a paper about taking stock in American Freemasonry. Evans, a Toronto Mason and physician, said, "No man can gain an adequate knowledge of any business unless he has spent years of patient study and consideration of the basics and details of that business." Thus, the patient work of becoming a Mason requires that our members take a lifelong approach to learn the lessons of Masonry. Therefore, without a difficult and long-term investment of a man's time, he remains a member of our fraternity and will fall short of becoming a Mason. Carl Claudy said in his work, The Master's Wages, "You will draw for Masonry what you put into it, plus a little interest. If you would take largely for Masonry, then you must give largely to it. There is no other way. Masons do work. When we come together, we are at labor to extend this good work. Like any work, those who spend more of their time within that work yield the largest returns. Masonry teaches us we must first receive the degrees prior to putting in the work. When taking stock or reflecting on Masonry, Evans noted that the work is the duty of a Mason. We are presented with working tools, and we must use them. Conversely, and as described by my middle school band experience, I can't become a musician without being patient and becoming a willing learner of that instrument. Thus, the difference between member and Mason can be summed up as instructed by our 24-inch gauge. In other words, time spent learning, or lack thereof, is what separates the mission of Masonry or any organization. It is the difference between creating beautiful music or having, as my band director said, a clarinet with half a Big Mac in it. In 1923, past master of Illinois, Norman Hickox, wrote a piece called Fraternity, which he stated, every lodge should be a school for instruction on the subject of Masonic spirit and methods, and that the brotherhood is a profession. With that said, when we don't prioritize teaching Masonry within our lodges, as we are chartered to do, our fraternity doesn't better its men or the world we live. More numbers have never given any organization greater quality. Hickox would find our institution cannot be greater than of those who it is composed. Recently, I read a book about a great Masonic journey, which began with, just get in the car. In simplest terms, for Masonry to succeed, we need 1, a man willing to learn, get in the car, and 2, men that know enough Masonry to teach that willing participant. Evans correctly stated, to educate members, educators must be found, because out of nothing comes nothing. Yet this point is potentially much deeper. Euclid gives Masonry the 47th problem, which allows a master mason to square his square. Without a school of instruction and a willing learner, man cannot learn to put his square to work. Without an institution to support this man's growth, we cannot provide that support and find that firm foundation as our iconic cornerstone symbolizes. Unfortunately, Masonry, like all organizations, collapses without men putting their tools to good use, which can only be accomplished with an organization to support such growth. How does this distinction of Mason and member impact the man and his lodge? Very simple. Merely within the crass cardinal virtues of fortitude, prudence, temperance, and justice lies a lifetime of wisdom. Courage is rooted in each of these virtues, and that is what is required of men who want to get better and demonstrate the merits of becoming a Mason. Finally, a Mason will autograph his work with excellence.
Brother Roger, you said that being a Mason is a lifelong approach, and it takes a lifetime to go from a member to a Mason. When does a man go from being a member to a Mason?
We've discussed this a few times, and I think the best answer I've heard is that a Mason is always an apprentice and always a willing learner. So I don't think it's a finish line work.
Brother Roger, if you instructed and educated 1,000 men over the next 4 years on moral and intellectual excellence, but provided no initiation into the mysteries of Freemasonry, and they took no obligation, would they be Masons?
No.
Are you a Mason?
Yes.
What made you a Mason?
My obligation.
So you would say that you've continued to grow and transformed since becoming a Mason?
Just because I was obligated didn't necessarily mean my work as a Mason was close to being finished or learned. It merely gave me the opportunity to learn. Masonry provides us with kinetic learning, which is a process and a lifelong one.
So you were first made a Mason, and then you began your sacred journey of transformation as a Mason.
That is correct.
Last question. Would you advocate a lodge not initiating anyone for 3 to 5 years so that they can concentrate on current members?
I think if that's the case with the long-term membership, I would advocate it with the caveat that that lodge does provide some sort of course where the interested candidate would get some type of Masonic nourishment in a non-tiled room.
No further questions.
Lexington Lodge Number 1 is hereby empowered and authorized to the Master, Wardens, and Brethren aforesaid full power and authority to receive and enter apprentices, to pass fellowcrafts, to raise Master Masons, and to perform all other work in the way according to the ancient customs and usages of Freemasonry and the Constitution. Those words are taken directly from the charter issued to Lexington Lodge Number 1 by the newly formed Grand Lodge of Kentucky in 1800. They echo the earlier, nearly identical language of the 1788 charter issued by the Grand Lodge of Virginia. These venerable documents have provided the legal foundation of Lexington Number 1 for 237 years. They explicitly list the 3 degrees as powers of the lodge for one vital reason. A lodge must have members if it is to survive. Self-preservation is the first law of nature. It is imperative that organizations of all types must first provide for their own survival before any other goal can be considered. If they do not survive, they will not accomplish anything else. It is generally hoped by Freemasons that our craft improves the world. We strive to exemplify positive traits. However, without regular contact with good men who may be inspired by our example, our influence on society will be negligible at best. Network theory promotes the understanding of complex systems by examining the relationships and interactions among their constituent parts. The term nodes refers to the individual elements in the system. The more nodes present in an individual network, the more dramatic will be the impact of that network on the overall system. When applied to the concept of society, the more members in your network, the greater your influence on society. Critical mass is defined as that size, number, or amount large enough to produce a particular result. Without attaining this crucial level, nothing happens. An organization must attain a certain critical mass in order to be effective. Otherwise, nothing will occur. Not Masonic education, not community service, not ritual work, not even a fish fry. If the network of Freemasonry is to have an influence on the complex system which is society, then we must have enough Masons to come into contact with other good men in civic clubs, governmental bodies, churches, and every other aspect of modern life to effect positive change, thus establishing a virtuous cycle where good men come to know Masons. They then want to become Masons themselves. They then influence other good men. When we think of critical mass within the working of the individual lodge, we may also think of it as community. One of the great strengths of the lodge is the ability to come together with like-minded men who can support each other through life's journeys. We've all experienced the benefit of this community, and we know that we are more likely to attain our goals if we have brothers to motivate us when we feel tired and hold us accountable when we stray. However, in order to achieve this model community, we must have a group large enough to not only be effective, but also self-sustaining. Otherwise, through attrition, our lodges will dwindle and we are left as individual men sitting alone. Without a critical mass, the fraternal experience of Masonic education and discussion is simply self-help. Our Masonic forefathers understood the importance of critical mass so well that they established minimum numbers required to even open on the different degrees. One Mason, or even one Mason too few, is not legally capable of initiating, passing, or raising another man in the craft. The founders did not believe that Freemasonry was something that could be performed by one man in a vacuum, but that it required a minimum number of participants to occur. Article 29, Section 4 of the Grand Lodge Kentucky Constitution reads that no charter or dispensation shall be surrendered by a lodge so long as there are 11 Master Masons, members thereof, who will maintain and work under it. This number is the minimum. There is no maximum of possible members. The Grand Lodge recognizes that a lodge must have a minimum number to maintain its character. Again and again, we see that to the founders of the Grand Lodge system and to their modern successors, numbers matter. The number one reason for a lodge to lose its charter is the failure to maintain a thriving membership base. In other words, lodges fail due to their failure to make Masons, to fill the seats and the officers' chairs, which is necessary for the lodge to open and conduct business. Once a man kneels at the holy altar and takes upon himself the obligation, he is a Mason. Not every new Mason will engage the fraternity in the same way, but each will play his part. Some simply as dues-paying members, helping to support the budget of the lodge and placing few demands upon its resources. Others will rise to be leaders. We cannot know with certainty at the outset which will be which. But if we are truly to meet on the level, then we must respect every role and recognize every Mason as a full member of the larger craft and not as a part of a caste system. Thank you.
Brother Tracy. So the difference between a Mason and a member is just someone paying dues and supporting the craft versus someone who's involved in learning?
No, there is no distinction between a Mason and a member of a Masonic lodge. A member of a Masonic lodge is a Mason.
Okay. So if you come and don't work and don't learn, you are a Mason in name, but are you a true Mason, a Mason in your heart?
If you are a man who has met the minimum requirements of the Grand Lodge, you have knelt at the holy altar, taken your obligation, and undergone the sacred rituals, then you are a Mason in every sense of the word.
Okay. Would you want some of those brothers in leadership roles?
Those brothers will not be in leadership roles. Those brothers will be in supportive roles.
They're not allowed to be in leadership roles?
Of course they are. But
Okay.
from your description, they're not going to take those on.
No, I'm not making a description yet. I'm asking questions. And my question for you is, what's the difference? You've told me they're all the same, but yet now you're letting me know that some of these men may not be suitable for leadership. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying some of these men will be leaders and some of these men will not, because that's the nature of life.
So we'll have some leaders that are not educated?
No, we will not have members who are not educated,
How will you keep that from happening?
because the members who are not wanting to take an active role in the lodge will not become leaders. How would they?
Well, if there's only 11 men and no one's educated, someone has to be the leader.
I think you must have misunderstood when I said 11 is the minimum.
Well, we do have a minimum. Mm-hmm. And if we've got that minimum, we have to have a leader.
And one of those 11 will be a leader.
So let me change my tack a little bit. If you have a brother that asks some questions, would you give him information, some books to read, some knowledge?
Of course.
If there was a brother standing by who you noticed wasn't asking, would you maybe tell him that stuff as well?
No, probably not if you didn't ask.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised by that, Brother Tracy. I really am. I understand you're trying to win a debate, but I am surprised at that answer. When you're giving this brother this information, aren't you in fact instructing him and mentoring him?
When he asks for
Aren't you
it
in
with
fact
an open heart.
making him a Mason and not merely a member?
No, I'm helping him develop as a Mason. He's already a Mason by his obligation.
Okay, all right. What about Masons on site? Why should they go through the obligation if we just need the dues?
Well, I am not a Grand Master, but that is a legal
If you
power
were the Grand
given
Master,
to Grand
based
Master.
upon your argument, how about Masons on site?
If I was a Grand Master, it would be unlikely I would make a Mason on site.
But they would
However, as a member of the Grand Lodge, I would recognize it.
All right. What is the definition of a Mason? And how is that different from a member? A member can be someone who pays a fee, such as a member of a country club. Additionally, a member can be someone who signs a form, as in someone who joins a political party. Also, a member can be someone who makes a profession of belief, like a member of a religion. What makes a Mason different? One difference is the initiation process. Initiation involves going through some sort of ritual and having secrets revealed to the initiate. But being a Mason involves more than that. We are also required to, at a minimum, return and enter apprentice and fellow craft proficiency. These require some level of work and memorization and a level of attainment. In the Builders, Joseph Fort Newton quotes the Handbook, that's a German encyclopedia of Masonry published around 1900, that describes Masonry as the activity of closely united men who, employing symbolical forms borrowed principally from the Mason's trade and from architecture, work for the welfare of mankind, striving morally to ennoble themselves and others, and thereby bring about a universal league of mankind which they aspire to exhibit even now on a small scale. We can take that same definition and use that to say this is what a Mason is. Henry Purtle in the Kentucky Monitor says, what is a Mason? Do you think membership in a Masonic lodge makes you a Mason? if you have the proper conception of Masonry, you will admit it does not, only in name. For membership in a Masonic lodge can no more make you a Mason than membership in a musical club can make you a musician. Writing on the prohibition against solicitation, H.L. Haywood states that such a man who has been solicited usually assumes the attitude that something is owing to him, that the promises that were made of the advantages that would accrue must now be fulfilled, and consequently he is not useful at all, and becomes not a Mason but a mere member, which is only so much dead timber weighing down the craft. Unless a Mason is willing to work, to endure hardships, and to make sacrifices, he should stay outside of the order. His name and dues are valueless if they are not accompanied by his willingness ever to serve as a loyal son of Freemasonry. What would these members do? Eat a meal, attend a communication, and then leave? Will they contribute? What will they receive? Why would a man join such an organization? We are not Masons in the lodge room alone, but are Masons outside as well. What does that mean if a man is merely a member? Why do we present working tools if they are not to be used? Evans, which Brother Roger mentioned earlier, said that Masonry, to fulfill her mission, must educate her members. Work is the duty of a Mason. He is presented with the working tools and he must use them. J.J. Evans wrote that in an address to the Toronto Society for Masonic Study and Research. Once again, Haywood, talking about builders and architecture, states, "What is a Mason if not an architect of the mystical order? Insofar as he is true to his royal art, he is one engaged in building up within himself a real but viewless temple, its foundations laid deep in character, its walls formed of the solid stuff of genuine manhood, its roof the stately dome of truth, its spires the upreaching of that aspiration toward a higher, which was the original inspiration of every great cathedral." And what will the lodge receive? A member who doesn't really understand why he is there? Will he be active in leadership? Possibly. And all the more is that not desired, men leading our lodges who are mere members. Or possibly we might forbid them from leadership roles and shuffle them to the sidelines. How would they feel? Would they even stick around? Why would we let good men in our midst, and good men they should be if we zealously guard the West Gate? Why would we let good men into our midst and not encourage them and help them to become the best version of themselves they can be? What a waste to bring a man into the lodge room and not stress the use of the 24-inch gauge and other working tools. What are our obligations to a member? A man spends a sum of money he can sometimes ill spare to join the fraternity. He devotes much time to learning the lectures. And very often indeed, the lodge itself does not do one thing to explain to that man the symbolism or to instruct him in his history. Something we work hard for and earn is much more valuable than that which is given. Coupled with the fact that we all will then require is a dues payment and attendance at a lodge business meeting, it's no wonder that such a man should soon lose interest in Freemasonry and wonder what all the fuss was about. We need to give men entering our lodges something of value in exchange for their time and treasure. To see them as merely a source of dues cheapens our brotherhood and turns a brother into a customer who is needed for transactional reasons. Surely no one in this room or watching would agree that this is how we should treat those who express interest in what we do. Our problems will never be solved by merely adding more members, but only, let me stress, that only by making more Masons, men whom we instruct, mentor, and develop as they seek to improve in Masonry.
Brother Bramble, why do you assume that a man with limited engagement in the lodge will want to be a leader?
I make no assumptions, but I'm saying that if he does, that's a situation we need to deal with.
And wouldn't the lodge be able to just vote for someone else?
They would, but if we've only got 11 men, or if we've only got 15 men, if we've got 15 men and only 8 of those show up, or 7.
So if the person in your scenario is literally the best person available, then they might vote for him. But otherwise, they're going to vote for a better option, right?
I'm saying that the whole system can degenerate that if you have so many uneducated men in one lodge, it can be a system where there is no education, where no one understands the symbolism, where no one even asks the question, what is the symbolism behind this object that I've been presented with?
Brother, could you help me to understand, what does the phrase meet on the level mean to you?
It means that when we come together, it does not matter to me what you learn, where you come from, your education level, just that you were there to learn with me.
Oh,
I
how
would
many
turn
books?
no man away who was merely a member. I'm just asking you, don't we owe that man more? Why would we have members who are active versus members who aren't? How is that on the level?
So you're not going to judge me based on my bank account, only the number of books I read?
Not necessarily. In my rebuttal, I'll talk about that. You may learn just by being in a lodge of men that are learning, men who are instructing and mentoring and uplifting.
If a Mason is only a man who actively studies the craft and really explores the lessons of Freemasonry, when we have a visitor to our lodge, how would we discern in the moment whether this man was actually a Mason or not? And if he's not a Mason, should we turn him away?
If that brother is duly tested and is found to be worthy to come in our lodge, we will meet him on the level. I would dare say that if he came to Lexington number 1, he would go through an education that night and possibly learn something. And he would be instructed and mentored.
But since we only admit Masons to our meetings, it seems that you have a double standard for whether a person is a member of another lodge or a member of our lodge. You're going to admit that they're a Mason.
Every member is a Mason. We're talking about what the purpose of the lodge is, what the lodge's role is in instructing these men. I don't want to have a two-tiered system. I want everyone to learn about Masonry.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother.
Let me begin with the constitutional foundation of our position. When a Grand Lodge issues a charter, what authority does it grant? Albert Mackey, the 19th century leading scholar of Masonic constitutional law, provides the definitive answer in his textbook of Masonic jurisprudence. Comparing dispensations and warrants, Mackey explains, the one restricts the authority that it bestows to the making of Masons. The other extends that authority to the installation of officers and the succession in office. This passage is crucial because Mackey identifies the fundamental authority that both documents provide, making Masons. Dispensations limit lodges to only this core function. Making Masons isn't just something lodges can do, it's the foundational authority the constitutional documents are designed to grant. Kentucky's Constitution in Section 7 includes the explicit definition, the obligation makes the Mason. What creates the Mason is the initiatory ceremony and the obligations taken therein. This same Constitution in Section 138 states that subordinate lodges are authorized to confer degrees in the entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master mason. Notice, the constitutional language doesn't say authorized to educate. It says authorized to confer degrees. Starting with the entered apprentice. That's initiation. The very first power listed in our state's constitution is bringing new men into the craft. Tonight's called meeting proves our point. The Kentucky Constitution explicitly states that a lodge of research shall be a lodge of research only, and have that right, power, and authority only. This notably excludes initiation. This provision exists precisely because normal lodge charters fundamentally authorize making Masons. Consider what makes Freemasonry unique among organizations. While many institutions focus on education, and anyone can create an educational club, only a Masonic lodge chartered by the Grand Lodge can make a Mason. Our charter isn't just permission, it's a charge. We are obligated to make Masons, not carelessly, not without education, but consistently and well. We have a unique gift no other organization can offer: the transformative experience of becoming a Mason. I'll say this again, only we offer the complete initiatic journey. Don't mistake what I'm saying and assume that we value quantity over quality. That's not true. The quality of our ritual matters, because our ritual is the transformative experience where a man takes upon himself the obligation that makes him a Mason. Let us remember the fundamental principle upon which our fraternity stands. We meet on the level. Yet, when we divide our membership into categories of bright and lesser Masons, based on their academic pursuits, we declare some brothers real Masons and others merely mechanical or semi-manufactured. We violate this sacred principle. We create the very hierarchies and distinctions that Freemasonry was designed to transcend. Our ancient charges emphasize brotherly love, relief, and truth, not academic credentials, not reading lists, and not scholarly papers. The constitutional authority we've discussed tonight, the power to make Masons, is entrusted to us so that we might bring good men into our mysteries and through the transformative power of our ritual, set them on the path of improvement. That path may look different for each brother. Who are we to judge? Which path is more valid? The brother who serves widows, the brother who perfects ritual, the brother who organizes a charity? Each follows his own journey toward light. Our charter commands us to make Masons. Our principles command us to meet them on the level, wherever they may be.
Brother Jeremy, in simplest terms, Freemasonry makes good men better. If we don't authorize or require our lodges to educate members, how will they get better without learning more?
We do require it. Master Masons are obligated to educate their members.
Okay. Do you think, I was not following that all the way, but do you think that the need for popularity today or in the past is killing the mission of making Masons?
Popularity?
Adding more members, the need for more people involved in our fraternity. Is the need for more members killing the mission of making Masons?
I would imagine if people are joining Masonry because they think it's popular, then they're joining for the wrong reasons. The reason is to have that transformative experience.
How would you find that out if they are really, truly there for the mission of Masonry?
We have the investigation committee. We have certain rules and regulations that can help determine that.
You're sounding like you're describing Masonry to me.
This
question has some bite. It is said, to train a dog, you must know more than the dog. Do the lodges have enough educators to support making new members?
I would hope so.
How do we know this? If they're not scholars, how do we know that they're
The way
educated?
Masonry is designed, you have to have a certain number of Masons before you can even make new Masons. And those Master Masons have to know the ritual. So there is a standard of education. There's a bare minimum of education for a lodge to even function and continue functioning. But again, that's the bare minimum. The goal of Masonry is to bring enlightenment to the Masons, and it's a lifelong journey. So once they become a Mason, that is their first step in Masonry, then they continue that journey for the rest of their life.
I do agree it's a lifelong journey. Let me throw a question that you threw at me. I quoted, and so did Brother Tim, J.A. Evans several times. He was a physician. Like many professionals, he had to study for years to be good at his profession. How many years do you think a Mason needs to learn his profession?
His whole life.
I would agree with that. Do you believe, as Hickox, who I also quoted, said, that the greatest weakness is the failure of Masons to familiarize themselves with our glorious history and the traditions of our order?
I think the more knowledge that you have, the better. That can be history, that can be moral lessons, that can be symbolism, it can be science.
Like Claudy, Hickox, and Evans, other iconic Masonic scholars, such as Andrew McBride, in his classic work, Speculative Masonry, confronted the same question we debated here tonight. When asked in 1914, is Masonry true to its mission? Not only did McBride say no, but he also went as far as to say inferior work of a lodge not only fails generally to create a hearty interest in its symbolism, it often creates a positive disgust. Yes, imagine that same look my band director gave when examining my clarinet. The unfortunate truth is men don't return to lodge when they don't get a return on their time and money. Wise men, which Masons aspire to become, learn from the mistakes of others, so they don't fall victim to the same traps. Popularity is a trap. During our fraternal age, Masonry ditched lodge work to gain members. Yet, this formula is like playing Jenga. At some point, we don't have the foundation to support all the blocks. Thus, to keep our cornerstones intact, we can't add more weight than our structure can hold. In 1975, Walter Calloway wrote a piece entitled Freemasonry's Nuts and Bolts, in which he states, one may read all the philosophy on Freemasonry ever printed without once finding that the size of members is a laudable goal or that a lodge with more members is better. Logically, the reason being is that we lack enough worthy educators within Masonry to support the making of more Masons. The work of Masonry, like any other profession, must be done by a trained Mason. Part of that work is giving back by becoming active within your lodge and creating that school for instruction. Joseph Ford Newton would say, in the men's house, one man living a brotherly example is worth 1,000 lectures on the brotherhood. This statement sums up Masonry. When used properly, our tools create better examples than our words will ever convey. Newton then distinguishes the work of Masonry from other organizations further. Men can make things by wholesale, but great souls, faithful and generous hearts are made one by one. Newton's words paint a clear picture of what that school for instruction looks like. When we prioritize learning Masonry one man at a time, we find only with less members can we have more Masonry. Masonry requires men focus on our cardinal virtues and release our egos. This sets a better course for our hearts and minds to follow, where the true work of our profession begins. A Mason has been taught the proper use of our level, where we learn harmony despite the concerns and other employments within our profane world. This transformation is what is meant by making a Mason. American Masonry today is faced with a declining membership roll and have found little traction with good ideas moving forward. Masonry has tried for at least a century to build its membership, and in doing so, we found that it compromised that making of Masons. The truth is, Masons often lack the ability to have that seriousness when discussing Masonry with non-Masons, which begs the question, if you can't explain what Masonry truly is and what it means to you, are you a Mason or merely a member?
Men have different abilities and different interests. This is a fact of life. It is unjust to expect them to all behave in the same way, to perform the same roles, or to be the same man. Not only is it unjust, it's un-Masonic on every level. We should respect the man as an individual when he walks into the lodge, and if he envisions a different role than Brother Bramble or Brother Kurt, he should be allowed to adopt that role. Joseph Fort Newton envisioned Masonry spreading its influence across the globe, shaping and elevating society by its steady influence. This can only be accomplished by increasing numbers, spreading through all levels of society. In The Men's House, Chapter 2, which is titled The Mission of Masonry, in describing the previous generations of Masons, Newton wrote, "They believed in the future, in the growth of large things from small beginning, and in the principles of Masonry as the true foundation of society and the fortress of a free state. They knew that the Masonic Lodge is a silent partner of the home, the church, and the schoolhouse, toiling in behalf of law and order, without which neither industry nor art can flourish, and that its benign influence would help to build this commonwealth in strength, wisdom, and beauty. Therefore, they erected their altar and kindled its flame." Newton goes on to write, "Forming one great society over the whole globe, it upholds every noble and redeeming ideal of humanity, making all good things better by its presence." Newton is not writing about a handful of men huddled in private conversation. He is writing of a vast movement that reshapes history. Brother, such a movement cannot happen without men, vast quantities of men devoted to Freemasonry. Newton quotes, "Keep the young generations in hell. Bequeath to them no tumbled houses." My brothers, we do a disservice to the generations to come when we pass on the tumbled houses of Freemasonry. Look at the grand temples that were left to us. It is our shame that so many of these vast monuments have been lost to leaking roofs and condominium developers. Every crumbling marble facade with its faded square and compass is a call for us to re-energize the craft. Those great Gothic auditoriums should be filled with Masons, and those Masons should then fill our city hall, our boardrooms, our churches, our military, and our society. By making Masons, we make society. By failing to make Masons, we fail the future.
Well, Brother Burdett and Brother Patrick have semi-successfully tried to reframe our discussion tonight. They've tried to reframe some discussion of two tiers of Masonry, of some elite body within the fraternity, when actually the question we're dealing with is, are we to instruct, mentor, and support, not merely add members to our rolls? No tumbled houses? How did those houses tumble? Because so many men came in with the wrong idea of what Masonry was and what they could get from Masonry. A watch fob Mason, a man who wanted to wear a ring to a business meeting in hopes that it would get him something. Someone who wanted to come to a social event, but they never learned. We've inherited that. These different abilities is not at all what Brother Kurt and I have said. We want all men to be educated. We want a rising tide to lift all boats. When men become Masons, they are given working tools and told their purpose. J.J. Evans wrote, "The rough ashlar will forever remain a rough ashlar if the Mason sits idly by and does not use those tools in the manner in which they were intended to be used. By no means, other than by work, can the Mason prepare his stone for the building." Walter Calloway said, "If there is a heel of Achilles in the structure of Freemasonry, or in the practice of Freemasonry, I should say it lies in the failure of the lodge to hold the interest or to educate the newly raised candidate in the degrees of Freemasonry." And later he wrote, "It is my personal view that it is quite impossible for a man to advance in Masonic knowledge without at the same time becoming a better and more useful member of the craft." Getting back to Brother Burdett's question earlier, making members is not what Freemasonry is all about. We are here for self-improvement. Even if there is a brother in our lodge who hates to read and who does not read, there should be such a spirit of learning that just by being present when ideas are discussed and debated during our meals, much more so when there's an active system of education, we can easily make members. We may be able to keep them around for a while until they get bored and see no use in being a member. How much better will it be for us all when we have made these men and made them into men who are seeking to improve themselves in Masonry? It is self-evident that there is so much symbolism in our rituals that no one will grasp it all the first time they witness it. And without explanation, many may never truly understand the meaning of these symbols. Whole books have been written about Masonic symbolism, and even then, there are multiple ways to interpret each one. It takes open, serious, dedicated work to use these symbols for self-improvement. In our opening charge, we heard that we're to promote a correct knowledge and the duty we owe to God. We're to cultivate great moral virtues. We are to work and lift up and help each other improve themselves. No matter the way in which it happens, whether by structured education or a spirit of learning that permeates the lodge, it is imperative that we instruct, mentor, and develop men in their search to improve themselves. With all due respect to those who have argued the negative tonight, there is no way that we should ever be satisfied by bringing men into our fraternity and then leaving them to their own best devices and hoping that somehow, some way, they find self-improvement they came searching for. Of course, we should help men become better versions of themselves. Thank you.
First, let me express gratitude for the thoughtful discourse we shared tonight. It's been a true meeting of the minds in pursuit of Masonic truth. However, I must ensure our constitutional foundation doesn't get obscured by well-intentioned but ultimately misguided arguments. While the affirmative has offered compelling arguments about educational excellence, they haven't addressed the core question: what does the Charter actually authorize? They've described what they think lodges should do, but not what the legal documents say lodges are empowered to do. When a Grand Lodge issues a charter, it doesn't say authorized to educate if members are sufficiently motivated. It says authorized to confer degrees. 3 centuries of constitutional consistency cannot be overruled by contemporary educational theory. The legal framework is clear. Degree work first by making Masons. The affirmative creates artificial distinctions between quality and other Masons, where from the moment of obligation, a man is a Mason. All Masons meet on the level, and there is no better or lesser Masons, only Masons on their individual journeys. Brothers, remember why Freemasonry was revolutionary. For the first time in history, Duke and merchant, professor and plumber could meet as true equals. Our founders created something unprecedented, a place where a man's character mattered more than his credentials, where the rough ashlar had the same potential as the polished stone. That isn't by accident. That is our sacred mission. We don't need quality Masons. We need good men and a quality ritual that transforms all good men equally. That requires sufficient organizational capacity, not arbitrary barriers beyond traditional Masonic qualifications. The affirmative presents quality versus quantity as if we must choose. This is their fundamental error. Their approach abandons both the legal framework and the Masonic foundation that makes excellence possible. If you value educational excellence, you cannot ignore this distinction. Our charter grants us the unique authority no other organization possesses, the power to make Masons.
Thanks, bros. Quick giving a round of applause.